Hey everyone, Dave here from Casual Shooters Podcast. Just a couple things real quick. Laser app. On our website, I've added a new page. If you go to sponsors, you can see links to all of our sponsors. There's a link for Laser app. You can get 15% off with our code. It's on the website, but it's a great dry fire tool. It's a shot timer and recorder. So it'll record your first shot, splits, transitions. It's even diverse enough that you can set up arrays in different rooms so that you can have to move from one to another. It'll record everything. Amazing device. Check it out. Go to our webpage, casualshooterpodcast.com. Also, Hoist. We've got our discount code on the webpage again, same page. But you get 10% off there, and we're talking IV level hydration for those of you shooting major matches this summer, even your local matches. It will help keep you hydrated. So go check it out. And also Gun Butter. There's a link for Gun Butter. You can get 20% off with our link. It's excellent lubrication for your pistols. Put a little on your lugs, the grease on the lugs of your rifle. Good to go. All right, so go to our webpage, casualshooterpodcast.com. Go to the sponsor page. Links to their website right there, and the codes are on there for you. All right? Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later. Welcome to this week's edition of the Casual Shooters Podcast, your premier podcast for the casual shooter. I'm Dave, your host. Leo, this is when you say hello to everyone. And it was a silent hello. All the people in Podbean world can't hear you. All right, Chris.
Hello, I'm here.
I don't think he's gotten the whole idea that this is mostly an audio thing.
Right. I don't know. Maybe it'd be like black and white movies back in the day.
This is only episode 95, but we're getting there.
We'll hold up two cards.
Yeah. So this week's guest is a USPSA Grandmaster in Carry Optics Unlimited, world-class BJJ practitioner, and of course my favorite, a former Marine. So this week we're bringing in Lane Gries. Hello, Lane.
Hi guys.
He's a little incognito, but his audio is fantastic. Lane, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself?
And I say everybody who knows me is not in any way surprised that I couldn't make this work. The worst part about this was I went and put on a shirt because I was like, I don't know, maybe they're not like the shirtless on the podcast guys, and now I feel dumb because I'm wearing a shirt. So
Dave has been the shirtless guy on the podcast. Yes, Dave has been shirtless.
That's good. Like I don't understand why we would change our normal.
Like our very first podcast.
Yeah, true story. I was like, oh yeah, you guys can see me. I forgot. Oh goodness.
I mean, we weren't complaining.
Well.
Whatever puts butts in the seats, like you can't argue with that, you know.
Exactly. All right, so Lane, what we normally do is ask a few questions to get to know our guest. Leo, there's been a little bit of a change up. You got the first two, then Huggy will get the next two, and then I'll take the last one, so we're not going back and forth. All right? You ready, Lane?
Yeah.
All right. Take it away, Leo.
So we like to kick this off with possibly the most important question ever devised by man. And that question is, what is your favorite movie?
Ooh. That's good. I usually break it down by genre, but I'm going to say Aliens.
Ooh.
Oh.
So
I don't think we've had an Aliens.
Yeah, like this
Aliens 2.
Everything about that, like especially as a Marine, like the Colonial Marine quotes from that are just timeless and perfect. You know, like I like to keep this handy for close encounters. Like that shit is like that'll never die. You know, and yeah, no, that's one of those movies for me that just like I mean I've watched it a bajillion times and like I still get like nervous at parts of it. It's like you're like the freaking aliens right there, but it's like you're just waiting on them to like show themselves. You know.
No, I like it. It's a solid choice. Very much appreciate it. So that's
It
good.
is.
It's a good kickoff. Yeah, it's a good kickoff. Good way to start the show. We like to get a little bit more cerebral with our follow-up questions. So, in that note, what is your favorite book? And coloring books don't count.
That's good. I have a whole bunch of like favorite books, but of Mice and Men is probably, if not my top one, it's top two. And I always really liked The Watchers by Dean Koontz.
Hmm.
Those are both very good choices. I like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a very interesting choice.
Actually went back, well, it's probably been like a year or so ago now, but because I read like all those like, kind of like Dean Koontz and Stephen King and Robin Cook books, a lot of those in like junior high and high school and whatever. And then it kind of hit me like a year or two ago. I was like, I wonder if those books are like as good as I remember them being. So I bought some of them to like read them again. And The Watchers was one that I was like, damn, like that's at least as good as I remember it being. Like that was a really good one.
I don't know if I'm trying to remember. I feel like I've read something of his, but I can't remember what
Like
it
it holds up
was.
over time.
Yeah. Well, and it's, and you also like, obviously like I can process things at a much like better level now than I could when I was, 12 or 13 or whatever. So I'm like, I wonder how much like I missed that was written in some of this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, Huggy.
So I would. I think Dave started laughing because of my face. The look I had.
Yeah.
But, anyway, so my question for you is, and who is your
the deeper stuff that you're like, wow.
So
ahead,
yeah, Leo just like chopped that old thing all up. But anyway, so Lane, my special question for you is, who is your favorite superhero? And it can't be underdog. No underdog.
No underdog. Can I say the Punisher? Like, is he a superhero?
Oh yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm very much on the train of like, I'm not really like a good and evil kind of person, just like pay dividends where dividends need to be paid. And I kind of like that side of what he does. Plus obviously like, the whole Marine Corps thing and stuff, so
Yeah.
you can't go wrong with that.
See, gave me chills. I love it. I love it. I mean, now the question is, which Punisher movie do you like? Do you like the older movies of the Punisher, or do you like the new Netflix series?
Well, that's a good. I liked the Thomas Jane one. Apparently, everybody else thought that one sucked. I guess I thought that one was like all right. But I do like who is it? John Bernthal. Like I like that Punisher. It's like, he's like way more violent, and I feel like the Thomas Jane one was it's kind of a little bit more complex with some of his stuff, but like I always love that because when he gets shot in like Puerto Rico or whatever it is, and he washes up on shore, and then there's the that guy like helps him out, and then when he finally is like, "Hey, I'm heading back," the guy goes, "Go with God," and he goes, "God's gonna sit this one out," and like I always thought that was just a badass line, and then they just shows up back in Miami or where the hell it was they were, Tampa or whatever, but
yeah.
I feel that Bergenthal is small for someone who you want to play the Punisher, though. I feel like the new guy they got for Jack Reacher, that new Reacher series, that's the kind of guy you wanted for the Punisher.
I don't know. I think that he's just too big. The Punisher is just, he's an average guy that just, is like, to me, is like, enough's enough. I'm not taking it anymore. That's just my perception.
No, I think along the same
lines.
Is
any Marine an average guy?
Oh, there's a lot like that at best there, like.
But I do like the new Jack Reacher. That's a good series too. I will have to say.
Yeah, and I think he's super
Yeah.
well cast in that because that character is more of a like kind of a quiet, like just like very physically intimidating, but he's not the like super. I don't know what you like, how you want to describe it, like super active, ultra violent type that like the John
Right.
Bernthal like Punisher is. Where like I think he plays it really well because that guy's just like pure savagery.
Yeah.
Now, Lane, are you familiar with another series of books that's based on a former Marine, but this time in Vietnam, the Mac Bolan Executioner books?
I want to say I've read one or two of those, and I'm definitely familiar conceptually, but I don't remember. Like I want to say that I read them because it sounds so familiar, but I don't honestly know which ones it would have been.
I've probably read about 6 of those. Those are really good. I enjoy those. I'm going to have to get back into those. All right, Huggy, go ahead. Your next one.
Oh, okay. So my next question is what is your favorite gun and favorite caliber?
A lot of things with that.
I've listened to your podcast. I know.
I mean, would you say like the question is more of like for me to use personally now, or just like, kind of, thinking, in terms of, I guess, like historical enjoyment, I guess.
Give us
However-
both. Give us both sides of it.
Okay. I mean, I think as far as like what I use now, like I shoot and carry CZ P10s, and I love them. Like they're just fantastic guns for me. And I wish I could say that as someone who is like sponsored and like, hey, like now that I'm saying your name, like give me a bunch of money. But no, it's just I'm really good friends with the CZ guys, and I was switching because I shot XDs for the first 3 years when I was shooting limited division. I was shooting an XD and 40 cal actually, and I was like, hey, I need to like go away from this. And I was like, hey, I talked to one of the CZ guys. I'm like, hey, is the P10 a good gun? He's like, yeah, you'll love it. I said, okay, just bought it and started using it. Like never held one, never tried it or whatever. And man, I really like those guns. Like I shoot full size in competition. I carry full size for like duty gigs that I do, and then carried compact and really like it. And I would say like, historically, I think I got to lean towards the M1. I just, I don't honestly think I like it as much now, but like when I was a kid and when I was in high school and even in the Marine Corps, I was just always obsessed with that rifle. My mother, like my parents bought me one like right before my first deployment as like, I think it was a CMP gun. And so like I got that, and it was just always like obsessed with that. And, I mean, it's got the distinctive look, the sound, the feel to it. And it's like, well, especially when you're like a young, stupid Marine and you're like, I grew up shooting like Mini 14 and like, you're shooting your, M16A4 and stuff. And then it's like, you start whomping rounds with, a freaking 30-06 and you're like, oh, so this, they did things a little bit different back in that day. So
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. So I've been listening to a few of your podcasts, and I've looked at your website and stuff. So I usually do the 5th and final question of this genre that we do is one unique to you. So knowing your BJJ past, who is your favorite MMA fighter / BJJ practitioner, whichever you prefer to go with?
very good question, because I like a lot of them. I would say probably Fedor Emelianenko.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just
OG.
Wow.
Yeah, a guy who, kind of was one of the first like prototype, extremely well-rounded guys, especially for a heavyweight. It was like 235-pound guy, fantastic wrestler, fantastic grappler, fantastic striker. Like he beat guys in all the ways that you can beat him in mixed martial arts. Fought the best of his era and beat the best of his era, and then it was also like I think somebody that personality-wise I line up with very much. Like he like there's the famous like memes of like the Fedor face, like Fedor excited, oh Fedor's really mad, oh Fedor's happy, and they're all just him like just stone faced. And I'm kind of the same way. I've never been into the like selling fights and the talking trash and the like jawing like during competitions, or whatever the sport it was. He's just like a humble, like very like a workman kind of dude, and then he also happens to be like really good at it. So definitely, Fedor is a big one. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I like it. That's definitely the OG right there. I mean, some still consider him to be the GOAT.
Definitely has a very good claim to be the heavyweight GOAT. That's for sure.
Mhm.
For sure. All right. So back on topic. Where did you grow up?
I am from Western Iowa, so a town about close to Sioux City, Iowa. For guys who are
Okay.
familiar in the Midwest, so just a farm town in Western Iowa. Nothing particularly special.
Did you grow up on a farm?
No, so I live in town, but I think my town was somewhere in the mid 2000s, or maybe close to 3,000 people, and it was like by far the biggest town within a 30-mile radius around there. So
Wow. Okay. The little town near me has almost 20,000 people, and I call that small. Goodness. So when did you first shoot a gun?
I think the first gun I shot was when I went to hunter safety in junior high, probably, because my dad wasn't a gun guy or a hunter or anything, and I got a BB gun when I was in middle school at some point. But I think the first real gun I shot was when I took hunter safety with all my friends, and so part of our hunter safety thing was you got to shoot like 5 arrows from a recurve bow, you got to shoot 10 rounds from a bolt action 22, and then you got to go shoot 3 rounds through a 28 shotgun at clay pigeons.
Okay. Just like a familiarization fire?
Yeah, because you had like the 1 or 2 nights of class or whatever it was, and then you took the test, and then they went out and they just did like a kind of like a little live fire, sort of morning out at the lake that's like out past town a little bit.
Okay. So how or when did you decide that you were going to join the Marines then?
Well, so I knew I was going to go into military probably by like freshman, maybe sophomore year of high school. But like going to the actual Marine Corps was kind of like the end of the process. Because I think like initially, like I've always been obsessed with military history as far back as I can remember. I remember being in elementary school and going to the library and like checking out those really big like Time Life books that have like all the World War II. There's like the air section, and like I'd take however many of those they would let me take, go home, and then I'd bring them back. And so I mean, I've been obsessed as far back as my memories go. And so then I got on a really big kick there where I was reading. I read all the Michael Shara books, so like Gods and Generals, Killer Angels, Last Full Measure, like the Gettysburg stuff and things like that. And so I was super obsessed with like going to West Point. I was like, hey, I want to go to West Point. I want to be an officer, like lineage and fancy and all that stuff. And then like, when you kind of like look at the process, it was like, you have to go get like a referral or something from your senator. I can't remember exactly how that works, but it's something like the senator can only give like 2 referrals, I think. Well, it just so happened another kid in my class got a referral to West Point, and him and I were like, very even, as far as intellectually, athletically. So it wasn't like he was more qualified than me. But in my head, I was like, there's no chance they're going to give the only 2 referrals that one of our 2 senators has to 2 kids from the same podunk town in Western Iowa. Like there's, so I was like, okay, so do you go to the Naval Academy? And I was like, well, okay, you go to the Naval Academy, you can like, or at least the theory at that time, what people said was you can request to like go on like, the Marine side, but that it's not like a guarantee. And I was like, damn, like I don't want to end up in the Navy. That sounds terrible. And then, things were kind of ramping up, because then 9/11 happened. Would have been when I was a sophomore or a junior. I think I was a junior. And 2001, 2, 2 to 3. Yeah, I would have been a junior when 9/11 happened in high school. And so then I was like, okay, I need to try to go somewhere and like get into action as soon as possible. And the Marine Corps like seemed like the way to do that, because they were like, the recruiters would come to our school, and it was like the Air Force like recruiters that came around were total turds. The Army guys that came around were total turds. The National Guard guys were kind of cool because they would always bring in like the scaffolding and set up like the little like rappel thing, and they let us like, you go like use night vision in like the movie theater. Sometimes they'd set up like that stuff. And then there was like the Marine guy, and the Marine guys were kind of cool. So like for me, that kind of sold it. I was like, I'm gonna, first to fight, all this and that, bam, going Marine Corps. so I enlisted between my junior and senior year of high school.
So you went straight in from high school then?
Yeah. I graduated in 2003, like in May, and then in June I went to boot camp then.
Okay. Now you were an 0311, so you were a grunt. Did you go an open contract?
No, I went in as an 03 on contract.
Okay. Now, how did you choose that MOS?
I mean, like pretty much everyone else, I was like, listen, like I want to go and shoot people. Like I don't want to go build stuff. I was like, I don't want to be stuck in a tank all day. I was like, I don't want to be a mechanic. I was like, I want to live in a hole in the ground and shoot people. So I made it very easy on the recruiters. I was like, hey, just give me this, like.
I asked because I knew that before I went in that I wanted to be Marine reconnaissance, but I had to be an 0311 or I had to be a grunt in order to do that. So I made sure I was guaranteed 0311 going in. That's why I was asking. Most people, they just go in open contract and that's where they get put.
Yeah, and I don't know, because there's a couple guys I was in boot camp with who were open contract, and none of them got made 03s.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, and because from being in, so at least the number they threw out when I was in, that it was a 1 out of 7. So 1/7, so 14% of the Marine Corps are 03s. So it's the biggest single MOS, but it's by far not the plurality, as far as Marines go. So yeah, we had a couple guys that were open contract, and so like the joke was always like, oh hey, you're 03s, and like nope, neither one, like none of those dudes ended up as 03s. So
wow. Okay.
So then when you went to infantry school, did you get a choice on your specific MOS? Like, did you get like the wish list or anything, or did they just assign you?
So when I went in, I was guaranteed 0311.
Okay.
So when I went to Paris Island. Did you go to San Diego from where
San
you are?
Diego, yep.
All right. So after boot camp in Paris Island, I went to Lejeune, and at infantry training school there, that's where I already had orders for 0311 to go there. And then I took the Recon NDOC at that point, got selected, and then went to a reconnaissance unit after that, straight from there.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually that's what happened to me, but I was voluntold for that. It was go to infantry school.
Oh.
And so what they told us there, I don't think it ever, like, the rumor mill was always that like you get to list like, 3 choices that you want to be for your specific MOS. Because when I was in infantry school, I think it was like 8 training weeks. And so it was like the first half was like general training, so everyone trained together. And then at about the 4-week mark, then they split you up into individual MOSs, 0311s, 31s, 41s, 51s. We didn't have any 0352s or anything, in my particular company. Well, so then at some point when I was in infantry school, they brought like a few of us, they called us into First Sergeant's office, and they were like, hey, or they didn't call us into First Sergeant's office. Sorry. They called us basically up on the deck, and they were like, hey, you guys need to, pack, PT gear and MRE and be on the grinder at like, 0400 tomorrow or whatever. We're like, oh, okay. And so then they sent us over to Camp San Mateo to do a recon NDOC. And like, we had no idea. Like they didn't tell us beforehand. They basically just picked all the guys who had first class PFTs and like high enough GT scores and sent us up there. And those dudes, like, it was literally, it was all the guys that got busted in the big hazing incident stuff for the recon guys. Like those were the dudes, they got busted like right after they did our NDOC. And so when we got sent to our units out of infantry school, and I got sent over to 1 Romeo 1, so 1st Recon Battalion, was like right after they had gotten, the hammer had come down on those guys. So at our NDOC, it was just a slaughter fest. So I'm trying to think. I want to say there was something like 20 people total. And so I'm trying to think. So obviously, so you do all the pool stuff first, so we do the 25-meter underwater swim. We do the grab the rifle off the bottom of the pool thing, come up. We do the 30-minute tread water, then the 500-meter swim, all in camis and boots and stuff. And So we had people kind of like, so the people coming from the fleet, a couple of them, like DOR, like doing that stuff. And then when we were treading water, we had like, 5 or 6 people shallow water blackout, and they get pulled out. And we actually had a guy drown while we were doing the tread water. So he, he's like really struggling or whatever. And he basically just takes himself to the edge of the pool and gets out. And they start screaming. They're like, get back in, get back in. And so this guy, like, he goes, okay, runs, jumps back in, and just never comes back up. And so they haul him out. They got him on the side. They had to call the meat wagon out and everything. So they're literally zapping him on the side of the pool. Like they're hitting him with the defib, and we're still treading water. And we're like, so like, is that guy going to be? And he's one of the guys from infantry school. And we're like, so is that dude going to be like, okay, or what? So anyway, so we get done with all that. And then they send us, to do the PFT. And it was like the meanest thing, like psychologically that they could have done. So they're like, so the guy actually running the, like part of the run was Rudy Reyes, who's kind of a famous recon guy.
Oh yeah.
He's done a couple, like, I don't know, like Survivor Man, whatever you want to call him, like survival type of shows or whatever. He was one of the cadre guys. And so they're like, hey, put on your PT gear and follow Sergeant Reyes. So he just takes off running into like nowhere. Like they just invented a PFT course out here. So we run like 3 miles. I'm like, okay, cool. So I guess that was the PFT. They're like, all right, you got 5 minutes to stretch. Then you're going to run down this gravel road, run around the truck when you see it, and then come back. And so they ran us 3 miles out to run the PFT. So my time was just atrocious because I'm exhausted. And then we get back. I'm like, all right, cool. So we're going to get in the back of the truck and come back. And they're like, all right, follow Sergeant Reyes back. And I'm like, man, this sucks. Like, so we got to run all the way back too. And yeah, then we get all the way to infantry school. So I was actually, we didn't get a choice on MOSs. So they assigned me to be 0341. So Mortarman. And thankfully I didn't want to be a Mortarman. But it was literally the day that you split to go grab your stuff. I'm like, with my group of soon to be Mortarmen going over to pick up our tubes and stuff from the armory. And they call me, and it's either 5 of us total or me and 5 other guys. They call us in the first sergeant's office. And they're like, hey, just want to let you guys know, like you guys are all dropping your MOSs, picking up 0311. And then on graduation, you guys are all going to be sent to 1 Romeo 1. So 1st Recon Battalion. We're like, oh, okay then. So yeah, so they sent us over there like right after we graduated.
Okay. So how long were you at 1st Recon?
I was there a few months. So I got there. We graduated infantry school Thanksgiving week. So there are no more pre-BRC classes for the year. And so then they didn't send any of the newest guys to the first BRC class that started in January. So they made us go to pre-BRC. But it wasn't like the kind of formal pre-BRC. I don't know if they had pre-BRC for you at the time. Because they kind of set up a little bit more of a formal, like a 3-week, like training class so that the guys that they were sent into BRC were better prepared. And so while we were doing all that, and I ended up breaking my hand at some point in there. And I'll be honest, like I had no desire to be in Recon Battalion whatsoever. Like no part of me wanted to go there because every time they kept talking to us, they're like, oh, we're snooping and pooping and we're out here observing and we're doing, this or that, and like we love it. We're going to crawl up on the enemy and observe. And I'm like, I'm going to be honest. I don't want to do any of that. Like I want to break things, light it on fire. Like you're describing my nightmare, which is like, this sounds an awful lot like bow hunting, like I don't want to go sit in a tree all day, but nobody ever asked me if I wanted to be there. So I just trained my ass off with them. And so I break my hand, but I'm still in training. And so whenever they would PT or go to the pool, they would literally just make me do lunges. And so I do like 4 or 5 hours of lunges like a day. And so the gunnery sergeant, Gunny Swore was his name. I'm trying to think of what his technical position was, but they were just dog cussing one of the guys that was in the pre-BRC class who was, a really like non-hacker. And they kind of brought up and they're like, oh, like, why don't you be more like Gries over here? Like Gries wants to be here, don't you, Gries? I was like, no. He's like, what? And I was like, no, I don't want to be here. He's like, why are you here? I was like, they sent me here. And he's like, well, how come you didn't quit? I was like, well, I'm not going to quit. Nobody said you could quit. Just nobody ever asked me if I wanted to be here. And so then they were like, oh, okay. So then they sent me to a line unit like after that. And like, it was literally just as simple as that. Like, I'm too big and dumb, and hard headed. I wasn't going to like do a bad job, but it's just like nobody ever asked if I wanted to go there. And as soon as he did, they're like, oh, well, if you didn't want to be here, we'll just send you somewhere else. So
that's hysterical. Like Gries wants to be here. No, I don't. That is classic. Oh, that is awesome. So when I was in long time ago, Lane, when I graduated ITS, it was middle of December, and there was a huge gap or shortage at 3rd Recon Battalion at Camp Schwab in Okinawa. And there were a bunch of us they were going to send there, but they wanted to send us to what at that time was Amphibious Reconnaissance School. Before it was BRC, it was ARS.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, well, the folks at anyway, out in Virginia Beach, they were closed down until middle of January. We're like, well, we can't send these guys there for a month with nowhere to report. So they sent us all to Okinawa. Well, like 11 or 12 of us to Okinawa. And we got there. They were like, what the hell are we going to do with these guys? None of them are trained. What the hell are we going to do? So at that time, so now we're talking December of 85, there were a bunch of Vietnam vets there. The colonel of the battalion was, he wasn't a hero or anything like that, but he had captured a bunch of Chinese or Russian artillery in Vietnam. And we had some other people in the battalion that were all Vietnam vets. So we're like, all right, we're going to run our own course. So we did a 38-day straight course in May of the following year. No time off, just straight. So we did a 28-day in the jungle and then came back to garrison. 4 hours later, they gave us 4 hours to do laundry and then a 10-day straight cycle of amphibious reconnaissance. So, and then that's what we did. And that's how we got our MOS.
Nice. Did you have to go to SEER to pick up the 21 designator at that time, or was it just basically ARS? Gotcha.
It was just ARS. And then they would try to get you to other schools. Like I was supposed to go to scuba, but nobody would sign off on my stuff. And then I couldn't get to jump over there because when the school came down, the flight surgeon was on leave, so there was nobody to sign my physical. It wasn't until when I got to 2nd Recon, I went to, hold on a second. Hey. I went to Pathfinder, then Airborne, and then when I got to the sniper school, I went to, what is it? I can't even think of it right now. Long Range Surveillance Leaders Course put on by the Ranger Bat. So I did naval gunfire and a couple other little ones, but how about you? Any good schools?
No, I never really did like any schools. So they had it was kind of new. I might have been one of the first, or maybe even like the first class to go through it. It's called the EMP, so the Enhanced Marksmanship Program. It was like a week-long like class. And so it's kind of it's basically like a CQB and like a close quarters marksmanship with rifle kind of class. Which, I mean, looking at it compared to like things that we know now or things that I've done now, it was kind of a little bit hokey. But at the time, I mean, for the live fire, I think we did 2 days of like live fire where we were just like training. And then the 3rd day was like, like training and qualification. We probably shot like 800 rounds or so in that time. And obviously like at that time, that was like way more than I'd ever done. And that's like way more than you typically do, as a grunt. I mean, like occasionally you'll go do like range 400 at CAX or something, and you'll shoot a whole bunch, but it's not like focused training. It's just like, hey, shoot 6 mags suppressing that fake BMP on the hill over there kind of stuff or whatever.
Right. Yep. Suppressive fire. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the idea was it was like EMP instructor course, technically. I don't know if that's different than just EMP, but anyways, so it was supposed to be basically then we were supposed to come back to our units because this was in between my first deployment, my second deployment. And then we were supposed to come back and basically like, because they sent a couple guys from the company. And then we were supposed to be kind of, instructors or assist instructing for like marksmanship stuff. But then obviously we got back, we did like one range where they're like, tried to have us like kind of set stuff up. And then like one of the platoon sergeants basically just took stuff over and had us do all the same dumb shit that we've been doing before. Like, all right, cool. Really glad you guys, came up with this idea that we weren't going to like try to use at all, But no, that was about it. Because obviously on the grunt side, there's not much access to schools. But then when I was in,
Right.
so I got to my unit in April of 2004. June of 2004, got to Iraq. So first deployment at that time. We got back in like early February 2005. We were back in Iraq again by September of 2005. And my battalion was in the invasion of Iraq in 2003. So there wasn't like
Wow.
a ton of time for those things. Like it was basically just like, because, like in the Marine Corps, the cycle is supposed to be like 7-month work up, 7-month deployment, 7-month work down, technically speaking. But they basically kind of flipped it to where it was like, just like, for us, it was like 8 months deployed and then like 7 months back, like for like, just as like they're just basically, by the time you do like, 30 days of like post-deployment leave or whatever, you have like 4.5, 5 months of actual like, training time. So there wasn't really access to that. They were trying to send some of us. The only thing that came available was green belt instructor course. So for the Marine Corps martial arts program. And so they recommended me for that, me and like, I don't want to say it was like one other guy in the company or something. I was like, okay. And so then they kind of briefed me. They're like, hey, it's supposed to be only for like, NCOs and people in NCO billets and everything. So since you're a Lance Corporal, like just make sure you tell them that you're a fire team leader, and everything when you get there. So it's okay. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds good. And then it's like a couple of days later, they were like, hey, they actually won't take anybody that's not an actual NCO, so you can't go. Then a couple of days later, they're like, hey, we're not sending anybody from the company to go. So the company had 2 slots and they just sent nobody to that. So, I mean, that was like, for me, that was like Marine Corps 101. It's like you have open training, you have people that want to take those slots, and yet they won't let anybody go train. I was just like, this is kind of ridiculous, guys. Like, I don't know if there's anything to be gleaned from this, but it's like, why would you not send somebody to go train who wants to go train,
Yeah, the Marine Corps is the greatest theoretical idea ever, but it's executed poorly.
That is one way to put it. Yep. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, what are you going to do?
But no, I kind of skated through. I think a lot of it has to do with obviously like being at like an ultra high tempo time. But so by the time I got out, I was a sergeant squad leader. I had never been to corporal's course or sergeant's course or squad leader's course. So I just snaked my way through all that stuff and without having to hit any of those things somehow. So
yeah, but I feel like being in a theater of operation during, I won't call it a wartime, but I mean, it was combat, just as any other war we've ever been in. I feel like that's a better leadership school than you would get in peacetime. So I think you did okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I've always been like a guy who's always trying to like learn stuff and get better at the craft. Plus, I'm one of those like, and exactly the D-bags I'm talking about in the Marine Corps, and I'm one of those D-bags, which are like the knowledge and the nomenclature guys, like guy who knows,
yes,
like the max effective, max range, rates of fire, like I wanted to be that dude who knows all those things. It's just stupid, but you know how it is. It's like you got to find some way to measure your dicks with people.
your knowledge,
and, yeah. And so I definitely like learned some of those things, but like I also realized that like I had some like severe gaps on things. I think part of it was like I was 20 years old when I was a squad leader. It's just like that's a lot of stuff going on for a guy who was a teenager yesterday. Like
yes, I hear you. When I went in, I had a contract where I was a corporal 13 months after joining, so I know what you mean. And it wasn't. There were several of us like that at 3rd Recon, and a lot of the older salty guys did not like that at all.
Yep.
So
bill it over rank, but
yeah. So listening to your podcast, I have a few more questions on military stuff. So what are your thoughts on the Marine Corps getting rid of their tanks?
Within the expeditionary mission of the Marine Corps, it might be okay. Because I know they shipped most of them to the Army. I think there's still some that are around. They just haven't like shipped over there yet. So it's one of those. It's a much more complex and nuanced question, I think, than on the surface it sounds like, because the mission of the Marine Corps is supposed to be expeditionary in nature. We're supposed to be able to be places as a MAGTAF, a Marine Air Ground Task Force, very quickly. And so we definitely do not bring the amount of support and ask to a fight that like an Army, like Armored Cav Division does. Like we just do not. However, we're in action, snap of the finger. You can have an entire MAGTAF, bam. However, looking at like the GWAT, like everything in Iraq was, and I was in, Phantom Fury there in 2004. So the second Battle of Fallujah there. And so that was just like, just like a grind fest, type of fight. So, there, like we needed to have the tanks and stuff. And we had Marine tanks as well as Army tanks with us, And so obviously like we used them and needed them there, but like in a way that's kind of like, that's not the mission of the Marine Corps, but you got us in like this occupation role where now you make it our mission. So if it's where they're trying to get back, kind of get us out of foreign entanglements and get back to a little bit more of like traditional textbook mission, I would say it could be perfectly reasonable. However, if they're going to have it be kind of bastardized, like it is, or at least how it seems to be still now and how it definitely was when I was in, where we definitely still had our Westpaks and our, our Atlantic, and med stuff, but we were also doing all of the occupation related, stuff in, in Iraq and Afghanistan. Then you kind of have to keep the armored assets, I think, in that case.
Yeah. I look around and, even I know you do World War II stuff. They were big in the European theater. They're big right now in Ukraine. They were big in Korea. We even used some tanks in the island hopping campaign. I just kind of feel like, how is this going to bite them in the ass in the future, knowing that the Army's not always there to call on for support. So a lot of times we have to bring everything ourselves.
Yeah. And it's definitely an interesting problem because, I mean, you're definitely right that we certainly used them, in the Pacific and we certainly used them in Korea and to a lesser extent, Vietnam. But you kind of seen, they sort of been like lightening the Marine Corps, as a whole, which might not be a bad idea. Cause I think, and I kind of thought this when I was in, was that the idea, or at least what we thought when we were, the grunts thought, was that we were supposed to be like the ultimate light infantry. We're supposed to be like dudes that like, you get us to a fight quick, we get in and we start mixing it up like instantly. But if you want to do occupation stuff, or if you want people who are sitting in some sort of extended front lines for a long time playing the artillery duel thing, that's not supposed to be what we do, because what's supposed to be the nature of the Marine Corps is that obviously like we're amphibious. So you would assume that we would be occupying positions that are near bodies of water and other such things, where like not only like our individual training, but just the loadout that our units have as a doctrine level have that, we have Amtraks and stuff. So use something like Ukraine, for example, it's like you'd want us around the Dnieper and shit like that, where you could use the amphib assets to move, amongst that sort of terrain, versus like, hey, put these guys in a meat grinder artillery duel in a stationary warfare. That, at least theoretically, that's not supposed to be what the Marine Corps does. But
right. No, I agree with that. It'll be interesting. Now, what are your thoughts on them going away from the M6? Go ahead, Huggy.
Oh, I was just kind of thinking that maybe they're going to end up giving them suits like, what was that, day after tomorrow? The exoskeleton suits or something like that. I mean, who knows? You mean you'd be like, what was that game called, Halo? You'd be like Master Chief and run around in the suit and everything.
Oh, I'm sure they'll have some sort of really bad idea before they get all that worked out. The O3s wear. So
yeah, I just thought I'd throw it out there. I'm like going, if they usually getting rid of something, something's coming in.
See, it's like when you see it in the media, there's been some poor like Lance Corporal that's been having to wear that on training ops for like 8 months, before the final product comes around, and it's like, but they never talk to him, like nobody ever interviews that guy.
Right.
Now, what are your thoughts on them going away from the M16, M4 platform?
I assume you're talking in reference to the SIG M5.
Yeah.
Everything I've read about that makes that sound like a terrible weapon and terrible idea. And this is where I talked about this in one of my podcast episodes because I got it really wrong for a long time, which is just like, one having like unreasonable expectations of like what a weapon does, But like my personal opinion is that for the role, the 5.56 and the AR family are as good as it gets currently. And like my personal opinion is that like until we get some form of new weapon and new ammo, because everything is still some sort of primer and powder and brass shooting a projectile. Until we get like some sort of like literal, I don't know, like phaser, this or that, or some sort of new ammo. It's like you're basically just modernizing technology that's 100 years old, or significantly more than 100 years old at this point. So I like what the 5.56 gives you. It ain't going to blow a man, out of his clothes and off his feet, but obviously like the recoil's low. It does, when used with the correct ammo and the correct twist rate and stuff like that, it's a perfectly effective round. It's very easy to handle, especially when you start talking about like, differences in, men and women, differences in like, body types and sizes and jobs and stuff like that. And I mean, frankly, the fact that it's been so successful being able to go from like 10.5 inch or what is it, like 10.3 inch guns and stuff with cans, up to like when I was in, we had the M16A4, which is a 20-inch barrel gun. The fact that it's been so successful across all that, I think is, speaks for itself. And then the M5, it just seems like all of the bad things about like the M14 and that whole time period of American history come back again. Because it's actually what I was thinking about doing one of my next podcast episodes on is like how I think that America set back the entire Western world for probably 70 years on firearm stuff. Because coming out of World War II, somehow everybody else learned from World War II that large magazine, intermediate cartridge, weapons that are handy out to 200, maybe 300, select fire were the way to go. But somehow America came away going, you know what we need? The 308. And because the British had the 280 British, they were trying to put on, which is like, a true like intermediate cartridge. Cause you look like now it's like everyone's going to what, like 6 arc and 6.5 this. And, some of those cartridges have been like existed since like the year 1900. Like 6.5 Arasaka has been around since the 19th century, and it represents like exactly what the 6.8 like Remington is, like 6. What is it, SPC? Like right now, it's the same thing, and that's been around for 120 years. And then you got the SIG M5, where they're like it's heavier. You watch dudes shoot it, and they admit that they're not shooting like the full 80,000 psi ammo in it, and it's clearly hard recoiling.
Wow.
It's and I've read that they plan to use up to like 110,000 psi ammo in it. So I think they're gonna burn barrels out like in like dozens or hundreds of rounds. And I saw a couple demo videos because the entire point was supposed to be that you have the ability to defeat like level 4 like hard plates out to, I think it was 300 or something like that, the distance regardless. But with something like 145 grain round or whatever. And so I saw someone do a demonstration of the same size round out of a 300 Win Mag generating the muzzle velocity that the SIG M5 is supposed to do, and shooting like rifle plates at distance, and at point blank couldn't penetrate it in fewer than like 2 or 3 rounds. So like the thing that it says it's supposed to do, it apparently doesn't do. But it's like I can't imagine how terrible like something like that is to shoot. And now you're back down to 20 round mags, and kind of my personal experience leads me to believe that like as soon as you start stepping up in recoil and in like what I just call like general explosive behavior of the weapon, then the amount that it gets used in combat is going to drop significantly, because it's unpleasant. So like dudes will shoot an AR like an awful lot. Now, granted, a lot of it's like ammo wastage and stuff like that, but they will put a lot of rounds in some direction. But I think when you shift to something like the SIG M5, I think the willingness of people to engage outside of like when they're specifically instructed to, or when it's really obvious that there's a dude there, I think the actual, willingness is going to go way down on that.
That's interesting you say that. I had a lieutenant one time quoting what he was saying the statistics were for Marines in World War II, or I don't even think it was Marines. I think it was just combat infantrymen in general, where only 25% of them can actually put rounds on target. Hold on. I've got one big old Great Dane who likes to bark at everything. But I want to say he was saying that only 25% of all combat infantrymen were actually putting rounds on target and not just spraying the air.
I've heard similar things. I think sometimes they quote like, the Dave Grossman stuff on that. And so usually it's thrown out, or at least partially, as people's unwillingness to actually aim and shoot at a human.
Right. Okay.
But then I think in the same vein, this is my personal like theory, is that like, and I own an M1, I own a Gewehr 98 Mauser. So, the version that was used prior to World War II. So it's a little bit longer. And some other, like, I own like a Mosin Nagant and some other, and a Type 99 Jap, like all World War II vintage stuff. And they are unpleasant to shoot comparatively. Like, it's like, if you have something to do and you're kind of like shooting, it's fun to fart around, but you shoot 20, 30 rounds through like that, through an M1 or through that Gewehr 98. And like, it's not really fun anymore. It's very loud. The recoil is, relatively speaking, is very high. But you take an AR out and like, dude will shoot 4 or 5 magazines and not be at a point of like physically not liking it anymore. So I think,
right.
I think that, because the other thing that they usually bring up, in kind of the Grossman reference and stuff, is that they've done a lot of training to like psychological related stuff they've introduced into training to try to dehumanize the enemy and get people, more willing to fire at people, which I think is accurate. But then I think that's another like positive role that something like the AR and the 5.56 plays, is just the fact that like shooting a 5.56 is not very unpleasant. So a dude will sit there and shoot rounds randomly at stuff because he's like, oh, okay, this is fine. But it's like, if that was an M14 or like an FAL or something, do you think dudes would sit there and like go through the amount of ammo that they would? Like, no, like just no way.
Well, and who wants to lug a heavier weapon around? I mean, you even mentioned in your podcast the M16 with the M203 grenade launcher. Nobody wanted to carry that thing around.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yep.
So, yeah. We'll see how that goes out too. So what played the role in you? I had a buddy who was in Fallujah, first sergeant, Bill Skiles. And he told me some pretty interesting stories because we were all at me, him, and another guy were at sniper school together. We still live here in the area. So we get together on occasion and talk about stuff. But did any of that play a part in getting out, or did you just want to get on with your life?
No, like I thought Fallujah was awesome. And from the standpoint that was what you think war is, like we didn't have anyone around us telling us like what we could and couldn't do, what we couldn't, could shoot and couldn't shoot. I mean, it wasn't really like a, hey, we're in green, hey, they're in, yellow or whatever, like kind of thing. So obviously there's still a lot of, play as far as that goes, but it was like, it was a pretty straight up fight. It was like they were in buildings, we were in buildings, we'd go into their buildings, handle business that way. And so all of that I thought made sense. What kind of like sold it for me was after my second deployment. So my second deployment, we were out further west and we took over for this reserve Marine battalion who was just getting chopped up out there. And it turns out they were getting chopped up because they were just every like Vietnam War cliche and war movie like cliche, like tearing their shirts off their like, their camis, sitting their weapons down on patrol and going and sitting against the wall and smoking. Like I personally saw those things. The post that they built on their schoolhouse, they didn't even put sandbags. They literally just put a lawn chair on top of the schoolhouse as like, one of their perimeter posts. And so we did that. So they sent us out to replace him. And basically I don't say this in like a bragging way. Like my unit was particularly experienced and the enemy's smarter than you think that they are. So like we went out there and we were pretty locked on. So the enemy just, they just went 10 miles somewhere else into somebody else's AO. It's like, it's just smart for them. They don't really care about this particular town or that town. They're just trying to find where they can do damage, take the least amount of risk. So we did that deployment and, we had some action kind of early on in it, but by the end there was just nothing going on to the point where like at the battalion firm base, which was the Haditha Dam. So if we were back at battalion, so we had like kind of a rotation where you'd end up back there for a couple of days you go to, train on the rifle range, do stuff like that. And then you'd also get to go use like the phone and call home. And like they were making people wear like 8-point covers there and salute officers and, stuff which you're never supposed to do in war zone.
Wow.
And then other things like, they're doing inspections for like, if you're wearing white socks, because like, anyone who's been to the desert knows like white cotton socks are the jam. Like that's what you want to wear. Instead of like anyone who's wearing, like those green wool socks or green boot socks or whatever, they're just awful.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and so those are technically the only color that's authorized in the Marine Corps. And so we literally had, like the first sergeant, and other people who were like, would tag along on patrol occasionally. And we're going up to like people laying prone while they're on like, perimeter security and like pulling out their, their trousers from their boot bands and being like, oh, you're wearing the wrong color socks, or just the fact that they're making us wear boot bands on patrol at all,
Oh my God.
And like, like punishing guys who were like rolling their sleeves, and it was all the people who were not present on my first deployment as far as like staff NCOs and officers and stuff. And it was just really dumb. And so at that point, so I got back from that deployment and it would have been about the middle of 2006. And so at that point, like the Marine Corps mission in Iraq was kind of done. So, Anbar started to have like, kind of the Anbar, like the awakening, they called it, the Sunni awakening out there. And like all the troop surge stuff that happened in like 2007 and 8 were all like around Baghdad and up north. And those are all where the army was. So the Marine Corps was only in Anbar province by then, because we had some units, I guess, down by like, Karbala and Najaf a little bit. But so none of that like concerned us. And so what it looked like to us was that basically we're essentially like getting ready for like garrison mission, because the Taliban resurgence didn't happen again until I think, around like 2009. And so like my contract was up in 2007 and I was like, dude, if like the end of my second deployment is what being in the Marine Corps is like when there's no like war to go overseas to, like, I don't want anything to do with that. So once I was up, I was like, I'll go to college and then see if maybe I want to come back in after that. And then, yeah.
Until next time.
Don't be a little bitch.
Yeah.